My name is Garrett Mitchell, 32, and I never thought I would be blocked from my own father's retirement party. There stood my sister Melissa, arms crossed, sneering at my clothes. "No cheap clothes at Dad's party," she hissed, blocking the entrance. Little did she know, minutes later, Dad's biggest investor would walk in, bow slightly, and say, "Mr. Mitchell, Chairman of Vertex Financial, I had no idea this was your father's celebration." The look on my family's faces was priceless. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that like button and let me know where you're watching from. This story about family, appearances, and hidden success is one you won't want to miss. I grew up in what most would consider an upper-middle-class household in Boston. My father, Walter Mitchell, worked his way up from an entry-level salesman to vice president at Thornton Investments, one of the East Coast's most prestigious financial firms. He was the epitome of the American dream, at least from the outside looking in. He wore tailored suits, drove a new luxury car every 2 years, and made sure we lived in the right neighborhood with the right zip code. My mother, Diana, was even more obsessed with appearances. She was the queen of the country club set, always dressed impeccably, always concerned about what others thought. Our home was showcased in local magazines twice. Not because it was particularly beautiful, but because my mother knew how to network with the right people. Every dinner party was strategic, every vacation destination carefully selected to impress. And then there was my sister Melissa. 3 years older than me, she absorbed my parents' values like a sponge. By high school, she was already mapping out her future based on status and appearances. She dated only boys from good families, chose her college based on prestige rather than program quality, and even selected her major, art history, because she thought it sounded sophisticated. Now, at 35, she's married to Bradley, a banking executive who looks great in photos but treats service workers like dirt when no one important is watching. I was always the outlier. From an early age, I questioned why we needed to impress people we didn't even like. Why buy a new car when the old one worked perfectly fine? Why pretend to enjoy opera when we could have more fun at a baseball game? These questions didn't earn me any favor in the Mitchell household. College was when the divide really began to show. While my parents expected me to follow the prescribed path of an Ivy League education and law school, I chose to study business at a well-respected but less prestigious state university. I had a plan, but it wasn't one they understood. "Garrett, you're throwing away your future," my father said during one particularly heated argument during my sophomore year. "We've given you every advantage, and this is how you repay us?" What they didn't know was that I was already building something. While taking a full course load, I was also developing a financial technology platform in my dorm room. I'd identified inefficiencies in how smaller investment firms processed client data and created a solution. By junior year, I had 3 local businesses using my beta software. After graduation, instead of taking the corporate job my father had arranged through his connections, I moved to Chicago to pursue my own path. This was seen as the ultimate betrayal. The distance wasn't just geographical, it became emotional as well. Our communications grew sparse, limited to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional family event. "He's just going through a phase," I overheard my mother telling her friends at Thanksgiving one year. "He'll come around when he realizes how difficult the real world is." The family narrative became that I was struggling, possibly even failing. In reality, my company was slowly but steadily growing. I lived modestly, not out of necessity, but by choice. I drove a reliable 5-year-old Honda, lived in a comfortable but not luxurious apartment, and invested most of my profits back into the business. The last significant family gathering I attended before my father's retirement party was my cousin's wedding 3 years ago. The subtle put-downs were constant. "Still driving that old car, Garrett?" my uncle asked. "Let me know if you need help finding something better. I know times must be tough. You know, Bradley could probably find something for you at his firm." Melissa offered with a condescending smile. Nothing too demanding, of course. My mother would introduce me to her friends with qualifiers. This is Garrett. He's doing his own little computer thing in Chicago. The emphasis on little spoke volumes. What no one in my family understood was that I had developed a philosophy about wealth and success that differed fundamentally from theirs. I believed that wealth should be a tool, not an identity. Success should be measured by impact and personal fulfillment, not by the brand of your watch or the address on your business card. I wasn't hiding my success out of shame. I was separating it from my personal life intentionally. You just don't understand how the world works, my father told me during one of our rare phone conversations. Appearances matter. Connections matter. You're limiting yourself with this stubborn attitude. Perhaps I was stubborn, but I was also determined to live authentically. If my family couldn't accept me for who I was rather than what I owned, that was their loss, not mine. Or so I thought, until the invitation to my father's retirement party arrived, forcing me to confront the divide I'd helped create. While my family was busy constructing their narrative about my struggling life, I was building something remarkable in Chicago. The first 2 years were admittedly challenging. I worked 18-hour days, slept on a futon in my office to save money, and faced countless rejections from potential investors and clients. The breakthrough came in my 3rd year when I developed an algorithm that could predict market fluctuations with surprising accuracy. This wasn't just another trading program. It was a comprehensive platform that helped financial advisors make better decisions for their clients. I called it Vertex AI. First National Bank of Chicago became my first major client. Their head of operations had taken a chance on my small company, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 6 months, they had implemented my system across all their branches. And word began to spread. Your platform increased our client retention by 27%, the executive told me over dinner one evening. And our advisor's efficiency has nearly doubled. What's next for your company? What came next was exponential growth. By year 5, my client list included regional banks across the Midwest, 3 hedge funds, and a growing number of independent financial advisors. I incorporated as Vertex Financial Technologies and began hiring a team of brilliant developers and financial experts who shared my vision. One strategic decision I made early on was to maintain a low public profile. I used my middle name, Alexander, in business contexts, becoming Alex to clients and industry peers. It wasn't about creating a false identity but rather separating my professional and personal lives. When press coverage became inevitable, I stayed behind the scenes, letting my product and team take center stage. By year 7, Vertex Financial was serving clients in 12 countries. We opened offices in London and Singapore. Our annual revenue crossed the $100 million mark, and then kept climbing. Venture capital firms came knocking, but I maintained majority ownership, unwilling to compromise our vision for short-term gains. The acquisition that changed everything came just 3 months before my father's retirement party. One of our main competitors, Quantum Financial, approached us with a merger proposal. Their technology complemented ours perfectly, and together we could dominate the market. After intense negotiations, we structured a deal that made me chairman of the merged companies, worth a combined $7 billion. The industry headlines proclaimed it a landmark deal that would reshape financial technology, but outside of financial circles, it went largely unnoticed. Which was exactly how I wanted it. Through it all, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I upgraded from my apartment to a comfortable 3-bedroom house in a quiet Chicago neighborhood. I eventually replaced my Honda with a newer model, but nothing flashy. My clothes were quality but understated. To an observer, I might have looked like a successful middle manager, not the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I don't understand why you live like this, remarked Thomas Chen, my CFO, during a rare visit to my home. We were sitting on my back deck, drinking beer from bottles. You could have a mansion on Lake Michigan, a collection of sports cars, private jets. And what would any of that add to my life? I asked him. More maintenance. More worry, more people wanting things from me. Thomas shook his head, but he smiled. You're the strangest billionaire I've ever met. But I respect it. My closest friends at the company appreciated my authenticity. We had built a corporate culture that valued substance over show, innovation over intimidation. Our office spaces were comfortable and functional, not designed to impress visitors with unnecessary opulence. We invested in our people instead, offering some of the best benefits and work-life balance in the industry. The freedom of living without pretense is invaluable, I explained to Sarah Jenkins, our head of HR. When she questioned why I drove myself to work instead of using a car service. I'm not playing a role. I'm just living my life. Keeping my success private from my family wasn't initially intentional. In the early years, when they assumed I was struggling, I simply didn't correct them because I was focused on building the business. As time passed and the company grew, the disconnect between their perception and reality widened to the point where explaining it became increasingly difficult. How do you casually mention over Thanksgiving dinner that the little computer thing your mother dismisses is actually a billion-dollar enterprise? How do you explain that you've chosen simplicity when your family worships extravagance? The longer I waited, the more awkward the revelation would be. So I maintained the separation. In Chicago and in business circles around the world, I was Alexander Mitchell, the innovative chairman of Vertex Financial. In Boston, to my family, I was just Garrett, the son and brother who had chosen a different, presumably less successful path. It was a double life that worked for me, until the worlds inevitably collided. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in early March. Heavy cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, delivered by courier rather than mail. It announced the retirement celebration of Walter Mitchell, Executive Vice President, after 35 years of distinguished service at Thornton Investments. The event would be held at the Ritz-Carlton, Boston in 6 weeks' time. Black tie required? I held the invitation for a long moment, feeling its weight in more ways than one. My father retiring was significant. Despite our differences, I respected his work ethic and dedication. 35 years at one company was an achievement worth acknowledging. Still, I hesitated. The last few family gatherings had been exercises in patience and restraint. The thought of an entire evening of subtle digs about my career and lifestyle choices wasn't appealing. I set the invitation aside, telling myself I'd think about it. My mother called that evening. Garrett, did you receive the invitation? She didn't wait for an answer. Your father specifically asked that I call to make sure you'll be attending. This is very important to him. I just got it today, Mom. I haven't had time to check my schedule. What schedule could possibly be more important than your father's retirement? The familiar edge had crept into her voice. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Everyone will be there. The Thorntons, the Bradleys, all the senior partners. The implied message was clear: important people would be present, so I should be too. Despite not being considered particularly important myself. I'll make it work, I conceded, knowing this battle wasn't worth fighting. Wonderful. Her tone immediately warmed. And Garrett, please make an effort with your appearance. This is at the Ritz. People will be dressed appropriately. After we hung up, I looked at my reflection in the window. My standard outfit of quality jeans, a button-down shirt, and a casual blazer was my uniform of choice. I was clean-cut, well-groomed, but not flashy. What exactly was wrong with how I looked? The dilemma of what to wear became unexpectedly significant. Should I go shopping for an expensive designer suit to appease my family? The thought made me uncomfortable. It would feel like a costume, a concession that their values were right and mine were wrong. A week after receiving the invitation, my sister Melissa began her campaign. First came the texts. Just checking that you're coming to Dad's retirement. Then, it's black tie. Do you need me to recommend where to rent a tux? And finally, Richard Thornton himself will be there. Dad's reputation is on the line. Please don't embarrass him with your usual attire. Richard Thornton. The name caught my attention. As the founder and CEO of Thornton Investments, he was also one of Vertex Financial's biggest clients, though he dealt exclusively with our London office under my Alexander identity. He had no idea that Alex Mitchell and Garrett Mitchell were the same person. The worlds were getting dangerously close to colliding. Despite the potential awkwardness, I booked my flight to Boston. I decided I would wear my own clothes, a well-tailored navy suit that I reserved for important meetings. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was far from cheap or inappropriate. If that wasn't good enough for my family, so be it. My friend and COO, James Wilson, noticed my preoccupation in the weeks leading up to the party. "You've been staring at that quarterly report for 20 minutes without turning a page," he observed one afternoon. "What's going on?" I explained about my father's retirement party and the family dynamics at play. "So your family still has no idea who you really are?" James shook his head in disbelief. "Don't you think it's time to end this charade?" "It's not a charade," I defended. "It's a separation of contexts. And honestly, I'm not sure they'd even believe me at this point." "Or maybe they'd finally respect you," he suggested. "If they only respect me because of my bank account or company, that's not real respect," I replied. The evening before my flight to Boston, I carefully packed my suit, a selection of dress shirts, and appropriate shoes. Looking at my modest luggage, I couldn't help but wonder what my family would say if they knew I could buy the entire hotel where the party was being held without making a dent in my net worth. As I locked my house and called a rideshare to the airport, anxiety settled in my stomach. Family has a unique ability to make even the most confident, successful people feel small again. Despite running a global company with thousands of employees, I was suddenly feeling like the awkward teenager who never quite fit in with the Mitchell family image. Whatever happened at this party, I knew one thing for certain: I would stay true to myself. That principle had guided me through building my company, and it would guide me through this weekend as well. The Ritz-Carlton Boston was illuminated against the darkening April sky as my taxi pulled up to the entrance. Doormen in crisp uniforms greeted arriving guests, while valets whisked away luxury vehicles. I paid my driver, straightened my navy suit jacket, and approached the hotel entrance. The grand ballroom had been transformed for my father's retirement celebration. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegantly set tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played in one corner, their classical melodies floating above the murmur of conversation. A large banner displaying the Thornton Investments logo hung behind the main table, alongside a professional portrait of my father. I scanned the room from the doorway, quickly spotting my mother in a glittering silver gown, laughing with a group of women I recognized as her country club friends. My father stood nearby in conversation with several men in tuxedos, looking distinguished with his silver hair and characteristic straight posture. Several of my cousins and extended family members were scattered throughout the growing crowd. Just as I was about to step into the ballroom, I caught sight of my sister Melissa approaching rapidly, her expression morphing from social pleasantry to horror as she recognized me. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than a decent used car, her hair and makeup professionally done. "Garrett!" she hissed, intercepting me before I could fully enter. "What are you wearing?" I glanced down at my suit. "Hello to you too, Melissa. I'm wearing a suit as required." Her eyes narrowed as she assessed my attire with the scrutiny of a fashion critic. "That's not a tuxedo. The invitation clearly stated black tie. This is a perfectly appropriate suit for a formal event," I replied, keeping my voice even. "It's not appropriate for this event." She positioned herself directly in the doorway, physically blocking my entrance. "This is Dad's big night. Everyone who matters in Boston finance is here. I'm here for Dad." Not to impress his colleagues, I said. Her voice dropped to an angry whisper. No cheap clothes at Dad's party. You can't go in looking like that. Melissa, my clothes aren't cheap. They're just not ostentatious. I don't care what word you use. You look like you stopped by on your way to a job interview at a second-rate insurance company. She crossed her arms. Dad has worked 35 years for this night. I'm not letting you embarrass him and Mom in front of the Thorntons. I noticed several guests beginning to glance our way, curious about the quiet confrontation unfolding at the entrance. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes slowed his pace, uncertain whether to approach. You're making a scene, I pointed out quietly. I'm preventing one, she countered. Go home, change into something appropriate, and then you can come back. My hotel is 30 minutes away. And I don't have a tuxedo with me. Then I guess you should have planned better. Her expression was unyielding. This is a milestone for Dad. If you cared about him at all, you would have made the effort. Each word stung more than I wanted to admit. The suggestion that I didn't care about our father, that my presence in inappropriate attire would somehow ruin his celebration, felt deeply unfair. I had flown halfway across the country to be here. Melissa, this is ridiculous. Let me in. I want to congratulate Dad. Not like this. She actually placed a hand on my chest to stop my forward movement. I mean it, Garrett. No cheap clothes at Dad's party. You're not coming in dressed like that. The hurt was rapidly transforming into anger. I could easily have pushed past her physically, but creating that kind of disruption would only prove her point about me embarrassing the family. Several more guests were now openly watching our interaction, whispering to each other. Fine, I finally said, stepping back. If my presence is such a problem, I'll leave. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise. Perhaps even a hint of regret, but it was quickly replaced by satisfaction. She had won, and we both knew it. Tell Dad congratulations from me, I added, the words tasting bitter. I turned and began walking toward the hotel exit, a complex mixture of emotions churning inside me. Humiliation, certainly. Being turned away by my own sister was a new low in our family dynamics. Anger at the superficiality of it all. Disappointment that, even for this important occasion, appearances mattered more than my actual presence. The worst part was the small voice inside suggesting that maybe they were right. Maybe I should have just worn what was expected, played by their rules for one night. Was standing on principle worth missing my father's retirement celebration? As I approached the main lobby, my resolve nearly broke. I considered finding a high-end clothing store still open, renting a tuxedo, whatever it would take to gain entry to my own father's party. The thought of returning to my hotel room alone while my entire family celebrated without me was almost unbearable. I had reached the hotel's grand entrance, the doorman already moving to summon a taxi for me, when the unexpected happened. Mr. Mitchell? Alexander Mitchell? I turned at the sound of a familiar voice to see an elderly distinguished gentleman entering the hotel, accompanied by two younger men who I recognized as executives from Thornton Investments' London office. It was Richard Thornton himself. Recognition dawned in his eyes as he approached me with an outstretched hand. It is you! What a pleasant surprise! I shook his hand, suddenly acutely aware of the potential complications. Mr. Thornton, good to see you. Gentlemen, this is Alexander Mitchell, chairman of Vertex Financial, Thornton announced to his companions. His company has revolutionized how we handle client portfolios in our European operations. He turned back to me with genuine curiosity. I had no idea you'd be attending tonight. Are you acquainted with Walter Mitchell? Before I could formulate a response, I noticed Melissa approaching rapidly from the ballroom, her expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. She had clearly seen me speaking with Richard Thornton and couldn't fathom why. Mr. Thornton, she said, arriving slightly breathless. Welcome to the celebration. I see you've met my brother. Thornton looked between us with sudden understanding. Your brother? You're Walter's son? He turned to me. You're Walter Mitchell's son? I nodded, watching Melissa's confusion deepen. Well, this is remarkable. Thornton continued. Walter never mentioned his son was the Alexander Mitchell. He turned to his companions. Gentlemen, it appears we have even more reason to celebrate tonight. Not only are we honoring Walter's distinguished career, but we're in the presence of his son, one of the most brilliant financial minds in the country. Melissa's mouth opened slightly. No words emerging. She looked like someone had just spoken in a language she couldn't comprehend. Actually, sir, I clarified. I go by Garrett in personal settings. Alexander is my middle name, which I use professionally. Garrett Alexander Mitchell. Thornton mused. No wonder the connection wasn't made. But wait until Walter hears this. His son, the chairman of Vertex Financial. By now, several other guests had gathered in the lobby, drawn by the commotion. I recognized many of them as partners and executives from my father's firm. They were looking at me with newfound interest, whispering among themselves. Is this some kind of joke? Melissa finally managed, her voice strained. I assure you it's not, Thornton replied. Your brother's company merged with Quantum Financial 3 months ago in a $7 billion deal. It was the talk of the industry. He looked at me with slight confusion. Surely your family attended the merger announcement? My family wasn't aware of my professional achievements, I said quietly. A ripple of murmurs passed through the growing audience. Melissa's face had drained of color. Not aware? Thornton seemed genuinely perplexed. But you're the chairman of one of the most successful financial technology companies in the world. It's complicated, I offered, uncomfortable with the public nature of this revelation. The crowd parted suddenly as my father pushed his way forward, my mother close behind him. He looked between me and Richard Thornton with confusion. Richard, I see you've met my son, he said cautiously. Met him? Walter, do you realize who your son is? Thornton clapped my father on the shoulder. He's Alexander Mitchell of Vertex Financial. His company handles over 40% of our European transactions. He's one of the most brilliant financial minds in the country. My father's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief as he looked at me. Garrett? Is this true? The lobby had gone completely silent. Every eye was on our family drama unfolding in real time. Yes, Dad. It's true. But how? When? He struggled to reconcile the son he thought he knew with this new information. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately, I suggested, acutely aware of our audience. Nonsense, Thornton declared. This is cause for additional celebration. Walter, your retirement party just became even more significant. Your legacy continues through your son's extraordinary achievements. He turned to the assembled crowd with the authority of someone used to commanding attention. Everyone, back to the celebration. We have an honored guest I'd like to properly introduce. With that, he placed a hand on my shoulder and guided me toward the ballroom, leaving my stunned family to follow. As we walked, he leaned in and whispered, That suit looks perfectly fine to me. By the way, I've never understood the obsession with tuxedos. Melissa trailed behind us, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. My mother appeared dazed, clutching my father's arm as they followed us into the ballroom. The string quartet continued playing, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. I could feel curious gazes following me as Richard Thornton led me through the crowd. At the center of the room, Thornton raised his voice to address the gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make a special announcement. We're not only celebrating Walter Mitchell's distinguished career tonight but also recognizing an unexpected connection. Walter's son, Garrett Alexander Mitchell, is none other than the chairman of Vertex Financial, one of our most valued global partners. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then building as the significance registered with the financially savvy crowd. I stood awkwardly in the spotlight, nodding acknowledgments to people who, minutes earlier, would have dismissed me based on my sister's assessment. The power dynamics of a lifetime had shifted in an instant, and as I looked at my family's stunned expressions, I realized that nothing between us would ever be quite the same again. Within minutes, I was ushered to the head table alongside my father, mother, and sister. Richard Thornton insisted on seating me next to him, treating me as the guest of honor rather than the family outcast. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My father leaned across the table, his voice low but intense. "Garrett, what is going on? How are you the chairman of a company I've heard mentioned in board meetings? It's a long story, Dad." "We apparently have a lot to catch up on," he replied, his expression unreadable. My mother, meanwhile, had recovered her social composure with remarkable speed. She was already explaining to nearby guests how proud they had always been of my entrepreneurial spirit, and how I had wanted to make it on my own, without using the family name. Her revisionist history was impressive in its seamlessness. Melissa remained unnaturally quiet, picking at her salad and avoiding eye contact. The contrast to her earlier confrontational stance couldn't have been more striking. After the main course was served and the formal speeches began, I was afforded a temporary reprieve from questions. My father gave a moving speech about his years at Thornton Investments, thanking colleagues and mentors who had shaped his career. He faltered slightly when he came to the part about family support, glancing at me with an expression that revealed his internal recalibration. "And to my son, Garrett," he added, departing from his prepared remarks, "who has apparently followed in my footsteps in ways I never imagined. I look forward to learning more about your journey." The subtle hint of reproach in his voice was detectable only to those who knew him well. When the formal program concluded and guests began mingling again, my father gestured toward a quiet corner of the ballroom. "I think we need to talk," he said simply. We found a relatively private spot near an elaborate eye sculpture of the Thornton Investments logo. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked without preamble. "All these years. We thought you were struggling, possibly even failing. Your mother worried about you. Did she worry about me, or about how my perceived failure reflected on her?" His expression hardened. "That's unfair, Garrett." "Is it? When was the last time either of you asked about my happiness, my fulfillment? The questions were always about status markers. What car do you drive now? Have you moved to a better neighborhood? Are you dating anyone from a good family?" He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "We wanted the best for you." "No, Dad. You wanted what you thought was best. There's a difference." We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. $7 billion? He finally said, shaking his head in disbelief. "How did you keep something like that secret?" "It wasn't intentionally secret from you specifically. I separate my professional and personal lives. I use my middle name in business contexts." After a while, the disconnect between who you thought I was and who I actually am became so great that explaining it seemed impossible. "So instead you let us believe a lie." "I let you believe what you wanted to believe," I corrected. "You and Mom decided I was failing because I wasn't living the lifestyle you approved of. That was your assumption, not my deception." My father looked at me with new eyes, as though seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "I don't know whether to be incredibly proud or deeply hurt," he admitted. "Both are valid." I acknowledged. "I am sorry for the hurt part." Our conversation was interrupted by my mother, who approached with two women I recognized as wives of senior partners. "Garrett, darling, Mrs. Hamilton and Mrs. Prescott are dying to hear about your company. I was just telling them how you've always been so brilliant with computers." The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Gone was any hint of disappointment or criticism. I was suddenly her accomplished, successful son, a narrative she was already weaving into her social identity. "Perhaps another time, Mom," I said gently. "Dad and I are in the middle of something." Of course, she said, not listening. But you must come meet the Blakemores before they leave. He manages the Asian markets division, you know. Such valuable connections. I caught my father's eye, and for the first time that evening, we shared a moment of genuine understanding. He had lived with this social maneuvering for decades. Give us a few more minutes, Diana, he said firmly. Looking slightly affronted, she retreated with her companions, already spinning my story to enhance her social standing. She means well, my father offered. I know she does. But this is exactly why I kept my world separate. 10 minutes ago, I was an embarrassment. Now I'm a trophy to be displayed. He couldn't argue with that assessment. Your sister is taking this particularly hard, he noted, glancing across the room where Melissa sat alone, scrolling through her phone with unnatural intensity. I should talk to her, I said, though the prospect wasn't appealing. Give her time to process. This is a significant adjustment for all of us. As the evening progressed, I found myself continuously approached by my father's colleagues, all suddenly interested in my insights on market trends and technology. Richard Thornton made a point of sharing stories about the impact my company had made on their European operations, unintentionally highlighting how significant my achievements were in the very industry my father had dedicated his life to. Your platform increased efficiency by 62% in our London office, Thornton told the rapt audience that had gathered around us. When Alexander, Garrett, presented the initial proposal, I thought the projections were impossible. He proved me wrong within 6 months. I could see my father absorbing this information, recalibrating his understanding of my career with each new revelation. It was nearly midnight when I finally managed to approach Melissa, who had moved to a small table in the corner, nursing a glass of wine. She looked up as I sat down across from her, her expression guarded. So you're a secret billionaire, she said flatly. Congratulations, Melissa. No, really. Impressive. Was it fun, letting us all think you were a failure? Did you enjoy watching me make a fool of myself tonight? That was never my intention, I said sincerely. What was your intention then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you set me up for humiliation. How did I set you up? You're the one who blocked me from entering based on my clothes. She flinched slightly. Because I thought you were being your usual stubborn self, deliberately underdressing to make some point about materialism or whatever. And if I had been just a moderately successful software developer, would that have justified turning me away from Dad's party? She had no answer for that. The issue isn't that you didn't know about my company, Melissa. It's that you and Mom and Dad have always valued appearance over substance. Nothing I'm wearing tonight has changed. The only thing that changed was learning that I have money and status. That's not fair, she protested weakly. Isn't it? Would Richard Thornton's opinion of my suit have mattered if I were anyone else? She looked away, unwilling to engage with the uncomfortable truth. I never set out to deceive anyone. I continued more gently. I just got tired of being judged by standards I don't value. So you judged us instead, she countered. There was some truth to that, I had to admit. Maybe we've all been too quick to judge. The tension between us remained unresolved as the party began winding down. Guests approached to say goodbye, many making pointed comments about connecting professionally in the future. My parents were processing the evening's revelations in their own ways, my father quiet and thoughtful, my mother energetically network building with this new information. As I prepared to leave, Richard Thornton approached me one final time. Garrett, this has been quite a revelation. I look forward to discussing the potential for expanding our partnership. And perhaps you might join our board? With your father retiring, keeping a Mitchell involved with Thornton Investments would be fitting. I thanked him noncommittally, aware of my father listening nearby. The worlds I had kept carefully separated for years had collided spectacularly, and I was only beginning to understand what that would mean for my future and my family relationships. The morning after the retirement party, I met my parents for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. They were already seated when I arrived, both looking tired but alert, as though they had spent much of the night in discussion. "Good morning," I said, taking the third seat at their table. "Garrett," my father acknowledged, his tone still carrying traces of last night's confusion. My mother offered a smile that seemed more genuine than her usual social mask. After ordering coffee and breakfast, we sat in awkward silence until my father finally spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about us valuing appearance over substance." His voice was measured, careful. "There's some truth to that, I realize." It was more self-awareness than I had expected. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad. But I want you to understand something from my perspective," he continued. "When I started at Thornton, we had nothing. Your mother and I lived in a one-bedroom apartment. I wore the same 3 suits for years, rotating them so no one would notice." I nodded, having heard fragments of these early struggle stories over the years. "The appearance of success came before actual success," he explained. "I had to look the part to be taken seriously, to be included in the meetings and conversations where real opportunities emerged. That reality shaped my worldview. And how I raised you and your sister. I understand that, Dad." "I do. But times have changed. In my industry, some of the most powerful people wear hoodies and sneakers to board meetings. And in mine, they still don't," he countered. "Different worlds, different rules." My mother reached across the table and placed her hand on mine, a rare gesture of physical affection. "What your father is trying to say, I think, is that we pushed our values on you without considering that you might be operating in a different reality." "That's surprisingly insightful, Mom." She looked slightly offended, then smiled. "I'm not just social fluff, you know. I've managed our family's social and community presence as strategically as your father managed his career." It was a perspective I hadn't fully considered. My mother's social networking had indeed been her career in many ways, and she had excelled at it. "I should have found a way to tell you both about Vertex earlier," I admitted. "The deception wasn't fair to anyone." "No, it wasn't," my father agreed. "But I suspect we bear some responsibility for creating an environment where you felt that was necessary." We spent the next hour in the most honest conversation we'd had in years, possibly ever. My father shared his genuine concerns about retirement and legacy. My mother admitted to overcompensating for her own modest upbringing by emphasizing status markers. I explained my philosophy about wealth and success, and why I chose to live the way I do despite my financial capacity for much more. "Would you be willing to show us?" my mother asked suddenly. "Your company, your home in Chicago. I'd like to see your life as it actually is, not as I've imagined it." "I'd like that," I said, genuinely surprised and touched by the request. As we finished breakfast, the subject of Melissa inevitably arose. "She's taking this hard," my father said. "You two should talk before you leave town." "I tried last night." "She wasn't particularly receptive. She's embarrassed," my mother explained. "Not just about last night, but about years of condescension. Give her time, but don't leave without trying again." I found Melissa in the hotel lobby later that morning, waiting for her husband to bring the car around. She was subdued, her usual confident demeanor notably absent. "Hey," I said, approaching cautiously. She looked up, her expression guarded. "Hey yourself, Mr. Chairman." I sat beside her on the plush lobby sofa. "Can we talk for real this time?" she sighed, setting down her phone. "What is there to say? You're a secret billionaire. I treated you like a failure. I was wrong. You win. This isn't about winning or losing, Melissa. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels a lot like you set up an elaborate gotcha moment. That's not what happened, and I think you know that." She was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you just tell us? All these years, Mom worried about you. We all did in our way. Did you?" Because it always felt more like judgment than concern. She couldn't quite meet my eyes. Maybe sometimes. But that's family, isn't it? We're judgmental because we care. There are healthier ways to show care, I suggested. Like hiding your entire life from your family? She countered, but the edge was gone from her voice. Touché. I smiled slightly. I guess we've all made mistakes here. A tentative truce formed between us. Not complete understanding or forgiveness, but a starting point. Rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort from both sides. 6 months after my father's retirement party, my parents visited Chicago for the first time in years. I gave them a tour of Vertex Financial's headquarters, a modern space designed for collaboration rather than ostentation. My father, in particular, was fascinated by the technology and corporate culture I had created. No corner offices, he observed as we walked through the open workspace. Everyone sits together? Including me when I'm not traveling, I confirmed. Hierarchy exists in decision-making, not in physical barriers. My mother, meanwhile, was surprisingly adaptable. She charmed my executive team with genuine interest in their work and roles. At dinner that evening, she admitted, "It's not how I would have designed things, but I can see why it works for you." There's an energy there that Thornton never had. The most significant change was in how we communicated. The superficial questions about status markers had been replaced by more meaningful inquiries about fulfillment, purpose, and happiness. My father and I began a monthly call to discuss business strategies and industry trends, professional exchanges that deepened our personal connection. Melissa and I established a more tentative reconciliation. Her pride had been deeply wounded, and rebuilding trust took longer. The turning point came when she asked for my advice on her son's interest in computer programming, a genuine acknowledgement of my expertise and success. Throughout this healing process, I maintained my commitment to living authentically. My home remained comfortable but modest. My car was still chosen for reliability rather than status. My clothes continued to be quality but understated. The revelation of my wealth and position hadn't changed who I was or how I chose to live. The most valuable lesson from this experience was that authenticity must be coupled with honesty. By hiding significant aspects of my life from my family, I had denied all of us the opportunity for genuine connection. True authenticity isn't just about rejecting materialistic values. It's about being truthful in all your relationships, even the difficult ones. My father summarized it well during a visit nearly a year after his retirement party. We were sitting on my back deck, much as I often did with colleagues, enjoying a simple dinner I had prepared. "You know, Garrett," he said, looking around at my modest home, "I spent my entire career accumulating the trappings of success. You've accumulated actual success while rejecting the trappings. I'm not sure which approach is right, but I'm learning to appreciate yours." That moment of mutual respect and understanding was worth more than any amount in my bank account. So what's the lesson in all this? I've learned that true wealth isn't measured by what you own but by the authenticity of your relationships. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy genuine connection or self-respect. Those come from living honestly, according to your own values, and having the courage to be yourself even when others don't understand. What about you? Have you ever felt pressured to project an image that wasn't true to who you really are? Or had a moment when appearances and reality collided in your life? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding authenticity in a world obsessed with appearances. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by your net worth, but by how true you are to yourself and those you love.